Coming up.
It's no exaggeration to say human civilization, as distinct from animal societies, is created by a certain type of speech act.
Animals make sounds, but do they have language? Do they have real language?
Tell me the stimulus that produced the response. Aristotle's mother-in-law had a mole on her back, but she worried about it so much because she didn't have the proper medication.
How can I refer to Aristotle, someone I never knew who lived 2,400 years ago?
It is essential to language that you represent states of affairs in the world.
How can a mere sound stand for a thing?
Every utterance is a speech act.
Our guest is renowned philosopher of language, John Searle.
What we're interested in is those actions that people perform that have semantic meaning.
How words work, from noise to meaning. Coming up on Philosophy Talk.
This is Philosophy Talk, the program that questions everything.
Except your intelligence. I'm John Perry.
And I'm Ken Taylor. We're coming to you from the Marsh Theatre in Berkeley.
Our thinking originates at Philosopher's Corner. That's on the Stanford campus across the bay. That's where Ken teaches philosophy, and I taught for 40 years.
Welcome, everyone, to Philosophy Talk. Today, we're thinking about how words work. How do we get from mere noise to meaning?
Well, my opinion, based on years of thinking about this, is it's a miracle. When I say the words, that is, I make the noise, Aristotle had a mole on his back. I managed to refer to Aristotle, whom I never met,
Really?
to put it mildly. He lived very long ago and very far away. And I not only managed to refer to this guy, long dead guy, but I get everyone else in the room to think about him too. I mean, it's amazing.
Oh, well, and it is amazing because just think about it some more. Not only do you refer to Aristotle, long dead Aristotle, you actually said something about him. Your utterances, those noises you make, they have this property of being either true or false, and their truth or falsity depends on, well, how things were by Aristotle 2,500 years ago. A sound you make now depends for its truth or falsity on facts way, 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 way back then. That does seem kind of miraculous. How could that happen?
And yet, if we look at it from another angle, it seems like it must be a very natural and explicable phenomenon. I mean, animals, after all, they use noises and dances and other behaviors to share information. An animal sees a threat, maybe a chicken sees a fox, it squawks in a certain way, and this serves as a signal to other chickens. So maybe we can see this, clearly helps the chicken survive as a species. It passed on, and maybe somehow our language grew out of that.
Yeah, the chicken squawks, I can see that. And other animals have these primitive systems of communicating. You seem to be suggesting, though, that that's the beginning of, human language, the roots of all human language. You really think that?
Well, where else could it have come from except through evolution? And if we're looking for a naturalistic explanation, that seems to be where we have to start.
Yeah, but the problem is there's just this huge gap between chicken squawks and you saying something about a philosopher who's been dead for a couple thousand years. And besides, I really don't see how the capacity to talk about moles and Aristotle's backs help our species to survive. So how could natural selection care about that?
Well, maybe you're going into an exam in classical philosophy, and I say, oh, by the way, don't forget Aristotle had a mole on his back.
No, John, you're missing my point. Look, as I understand, chicken squawks are really interesting. They have about 30 different cries, and each cry seems to signal a different kind of predator, and they have different kind of behaviors as a consequences of this squawk. That's pretty amazing. That really is amazing. But it's like nothing. It's not even child's play. It's like ants play. It's like, frog play compared to the complexity of human language. It's not even close.
Well, I agree. Chickens are pretty amazing. They know the difference between, here comes a fox, here comes a snake, here comes a hawk. But we got a lot more than that in human language. We got more than 30 words. We got more than 300 words. We got a zillion words. And what's more, we got all these different ways of putting the words together, so we get an infinity of sentences.
Yeah. Like, I'm going to play a game. You guys can play along out there. Because we have this sentence, Aristotle had a mole on his back. But I can make a longer sentence just by adding a few clauses. Aristotle had a mother-in-law whose second husband had a daughter who didn't have a mole on her back, although she worried about it incessantly. I bet you could play along too. Add some clauses. Yeah, but maybe she shouldn't have worried about it.
And was
so much.
criticized, therefore, by her uncle,
And blah, blah, blah.
who
But
didn't
look,
have a mole on his back either.
Right, but look, I'll wager you that you and everybody out there, you never heard that sentence before, that exact sentence, but you grasp immediately what things would have to be like 2,500 years ago, because we're talking about long dead Aristotle, for that sentence to be true. So it's amazing.
Well, so we agree. There's a long route from the dances of bees and the squawks of chickens to what humans do. It's long and complicated.
And torturous, but that sounds depressing and hard. But look at it on the bright side, John. If human language weren't so complicated and mind-boggling, well, we wouldn't have the philosophy of language that you and I love so much and do so well. I mean, what would we be doing? We'd be sweeping floors at Stanford instead of being the illustrious professors we are.
That's a good point. Language is an important part of what sets humans apart from animals, and also from baby humans. We sent our roving philosophical reporter, Shuka Kalantari, to find out what we can learn from the cry of a coyote or the babble of a baby. She files this report.
Most people know that coyotes howl. But did you know they also bark, growl, yip, and whine? A long howl from a coyote means he's letting members of his pack know where he is. A short bark means danger is ahead. Then there's dolphins, the brainiacs of the sea. Dolphins have signature whistles, kind of like we all have different names. And they use these whistles to say hello to each other. And they can laugh. And it's not just mammals. Bees also use sound to communicate, especially virgin queen bees. When a beehive is queenless, a bunch of potential queens develop simultaneously in the honeycomb. The first one born looks for the other queen bees by making a piping sound. Then she kills them all. Fortunately, we humans are way smarter than queen bees. But before we were a bunch of smarty pants ruminating over the philosophy of language, we were just babbling babies.
There's quite a bit of evidence that what children are doing when they're babbling is working out the relationships between the sounds that they hear and the movements that they produce.
That's Alison Gopnik, author of The Philosophical Baby.
So you could think of babbling as being a little sort of tutorial, a little exercise in how do you actually manage to use your mouth and your vocal cords to make one sound as opposed to another sound.
Gopnik says while we may not learn much about human language from the buzzing of a bee, we can learn a lot by studying baby banter.
When babies start to babble, there's really fascinating evidence that they are even sensitive to the special intonation patterns of their own language. So my granddaughter, who's just a year old, will pick up a book and she'll go, "Aga-ba, ba-ga-ba-ga-ba." So she can't really talk, let alone read, but she has the idea that when you pick up a book, you produce a certain kind of intonation pattern.
Not only do babies understand intonation, they're also more sensitive to the differences and contrasts in all languages. For example, a Japanese adult who doesn't speak English can't hear the difference between the words rice and lice, but a newborn Japanese baby can.
So they're sort of citizens of the world. They are able to discriminate all those different sounds.
Gopnik says the flexibility of a baby's mind, what scientists call neuroplasticity, may be why babies are much better learners than grown-ups. Kids quickly learn that a word as simple as mom can have a lot of weight behind it.
My wonderful grandson turned to me the other day and said, "Are you a kind of mommy?" Which was really interesting because it suggested that even for a word as simple as mommy, it's not so easy to figure out what that word actually means. Is it just that one person? Is it something about your relationship to someone else? Is it something about how you treat the other person?
She says when children begin to talk, they almost immediately use words like uh-oh or no to convey concepts and ideas.
Children do use no to simply say that they're not going to do something. But they also use no to talk about the fact that, say, a sentence isn't true. And to be able to do that is actually pretty sophisticated from a philosophical perspective. It means here's a possible way the world might be, and it's different from the way the world actually is.
Humans have the longest period of childhood of any species. Maybe that's why we can pick up very complicated systems like language. Alison Gopnik says philosophers can learn a lot by looking at the malleable minds of children, because a baby's babble could speak volumes. For Philosophy Talk, I'm Shuka Kalantari.
Thank you, Shuka, for teaching us about coyotes and children and other fascinating creatures. I'm John Perry, along with my fellow philosopher from Stanford, Ken Taylor. We're coming to you from the Marsh Theatre at Berkeley, California.
Our guest today is a professor from the UC Berkeley, one who's been at Berkeley for a very long time. He's a very distinguished philosopher, author of many influential and widely read books. His most recent is Seeing Things as They Are, A Theory of Perception. Please welcome to the Philosophy Talk stage, John Searle.
John, way back in 1965, about the time Ken there was getting his first pair of long pants, I was in graduate school, and my professor, Max Black, edited a volume called Philosophy in America. And the idea of the book was it had essays from the people he regarded as the country's most exciting young philosophers. And, of course, the volume starred you. Of course, you were young then. We're talking 1965, for crying out loud. So, my question, how did that precocious kid, John Searle, that started such a meteoric career back in the 60s, how did he get interested in philosophy, and particularly the philosophy of language?
Yeah. Okay. The secret of being a philosopher, I discovered before I ever started doing it professionally, when I was really a little kid, is you have to be astounded by what any sane person takes as too obvious to be worth remarking on. So, for example, I make these noises through my mouth, and it's some kind of big deal. Amazingly, they even pay me to do it at the institution nearby. And that led me to the question, how the hell does that work? And I happened to enter philosophy at a very exciting time when the philosophy of language was the main topic. And the guys who actually taught me how to do the subject, like J.L. Austin and Peter Strawson, they were among the world's leading expert in this. So that's really how I got onto it.
So Ken and I were struck by the gap between animal communication and human language. Now, given that gap, well, what do you think? Is there anything that, at least with respect to philosophical questions, we can learn from animal language?
Yeah, you can learn a whole lot. Now, I have an indoor laboratory of animal communication, and I've had a whole sequence of these wonderful dogs. They have wonderful names: Frege, Russell, Ludwig, Gilbert, and now Tarski. And I learn a lot from Tarski every day. Now, what I learn is Tarski does not have meaning in our sense. Tarski can bark when there's somebody at the door, but his bark is not a speech act like my statement, there's somebody at the door. Why not? Well, his bark is just a response to a stimulus, and most of what passes for animal communication is responses to immediate stimulus.
Sir, but wait a minute. That's what the behaviorists thought human language was.
Yeah, they
back
were
in
mistaken.
the day, I mean, those chickens squawk. There's 30 different squawks, and they're correlated with different kind of predators.
Yeah.
Why isn't that fox around, snake around?
Yeah. Tell me the stimulus that produced the response. Aristotle's mother-in-law had a mole on her back, but she worried about it so much because she didn't have the proper medication. You see, I don't get the relation to the stimulus there. Now, I think it's wonderful that animals can do this, but we have to make a crucial difference between expressing an emotional state, expressing a state. And the vervet monkey has 3 different signals for danger, different kinds of danger. Danger from snakes, danger from hawks, and danger from tigers. But those responses are not speech acts. They don't represent a state of affairs. They're not evaluable as true or false. They're just responses.
Now, you know, my dog Gretchen may well be considerably brighter than your dog Tarzan.
No doubt.
But because, she'll come up to me at, say, 11 o'clock at night. She's been out. She's had her pills. She's had her treats. There's no stimulation. There's no hunger. But she has in mind that she wants a treat. And she'll just, I'm lying down by then. She just nudges me with her nose and waits expectantly.
Yeah.
Now, I
Tarzan
interpret
can do
that
that.
as she is conveying to me her desire for one last and completely undeserved treat. It's a speech act.
Yeah.
So look, we're going to have to get into this after the break. This is Philosophy Talk, coming to you from the Marsh Theatre. Our guest is John Searle from UC Berkeley, and we're thinking about how words work, from noise to meaning.
Is meaning a miracle or just a natural development from the primitive ways animals communicate? Or maybe both?
Language, meaning, and miracles, along with questions from our miraculous and linguistic audience when Philosophy Talk continues.
Self-respect, I'll never be a star, 'cause there's just 2 songs in me, and this is number 3.
Thank you to our musical guests, the Playtones, and their musical refutation of Skinner's philosophy of language. This is Philosophy Talk. I'm John Perry.
And I'm Ken Taylor. Our guest is John Searle from UC Berkeley, and we're thinking about how we get from mere noise to meaning, how words work.
What exactly is meaning? How do words, mere sounds and scribbles, come to have meaning? Join the discussion by stepping up to the microphone in front of the stage and waiting your turn.
So, John, maybe this question will help you respond to in the way you wanted to say to John Perry. So I want to ask you, let's just get clear about what we mean by linguistic.
Okay, let me make it clear. Of course, we're not so much interested in the ordinary use of this, because it's got all kinds of use, like, you mean a lot to me, Sally, and that we're not interested in that.
We're talking about
But
linguistic.
what we're interested in is those performances, those actions that people perform that have semantic meaning, that have meaning in the linguistic sense. Now, the key feature of those is that even when they are responses to an immediate stimulus, so I say, I haven't got any more beer in my glass or something like that, they represent a state of affairs, and they represent it in one of a very limited number of possible ways. You tell people how things are, you try to get them to do things, you commit yourself to doing things, and that's what makes it semantics. And in the jargon, I say you impose conditions of satisfaction, like truth conditions. You impose those on one of your utterances. And the problem with the doggy case, my doggy does stuff like that too, expresses a desire. But the doggy might say, I want a treat now, but he can't say, I want the same treat next week.
Wait a
And
minute, I'm
that's
not
the
sure I
mark
follow
of
you. Wait a
meaning.
minute. So you said,
Oh, I'll work on
wait,
that.
you say
with
you
my
represent a state of affairs like the cup is on the table. In the sense of trying to impose what you called satisfaction conditions.
Exactly.
Like,
Truth conditions.
here's one. Hand me the cup that's on the
Yeah,
table.
that's
like
another
I'm trying to
condition
get
that's-
you to
exactly.
bring something about. Or I say, oh, isn't the cup on the table? I'm trying to get you to agree. So you think there has to be some, like, it sounds like you think some broader intention,
Yeah,
some
the
kind of...
key to meaning is a special kind of intention. And I don't know if other animals have it, because the problem with the ethologists is they don't have a rich enough apparatus to pose the question. But the intention is to impose conditions of satisfaction on conditions of satisfaction.
So you think the chickens, they squawk.
They
and
respond.
Okay, they respond to the stimulus of a hawk or a snake.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. And the other chickens are conditioned to respond to that response.
Yeah.
But there's nothing in the first chicken's mind that makes that a meaningful utterance. It's just a response.
Yeah, it's like my doggy.
So suppose we're observing chickens, and we saw there's one chicken that seems to be doing something a little bit different. If some other chickens have crowded around some corn and she can't get at it, she'll give the squawk, "Here comes a snake."
Oh, yeah.
And then when they disappear, she'll now.
Oh, that's a sneaky chicken.
Would that be more human?
Well, she's getting there because she's getting close. Now, the remarkable thing about human language, this is a stunning achievement. Humans can lie. And she is getting there. She didn't actually lie, but she did deliberately mislead, we can suppose.
No, you thought it was
See,
just...
once you've got this ability to represent a state of affairs, you can say it's raining, you can say it's going to rain tomorrow, you can lie. You can represent a state of affairs which you know doesn't exist. That's a remarkable achievement.
So ethologists call there are some species who do this. I think monkeys, various apes, they call that Machiavellian intelligence.
Yeah.
So they use the expected response of their conspecifics to apparently deceive them, to manipulate them, to get the food, to say, oh, just like, and that's an example out of some of this research.
It's a little known fact that Machiavelli used to get wine that way at parties. He would say, oh, it's our fire.
So look, okay, so...
No, look, my plea here is not to make a special case for humans. Who knows? Maybe there are chimpanzees that are producing the equivalent of the Critique of Pure Reason. I don't give a damn. That's so much the better for them. What I'm interested in is the special features of what we think of as semantics in humans. I know for a fact that my doggy doesn't have it, and I don't believe the stories about the dolphins and so on, but maybe they'll turn out to be right. The point is not to plea for this animal as opposed to animal, but to identify the phenomenon. And the phenomenon is semantic representation. You represent something as being the case or something you want to be the case. And the animal case you gave me don't have that.
So
they're
look,
just responses.
Descartes, a long time ago, Descartes was a dualist. He had all kinds of arguments for dualism. But one kind of indirect argument he had for dualism, which actually greatly influenced Chomsky. Chomsky wrote a book called Cartesian linguistics that it picks up on the thing I'm about to tell you. It's the thing we showed in the opening. I gave you this arbitrary sentence, which you knew how to add on arbitrary clauses, and even after you added on the arbitrary clause, you knew exactly what it meant, even though it was the first time you saw it. That can't be a stimulus-response kind of thing.
That's right.
Descartes said, well, look, animals could have language, but that's only like a stimulus-response kind of thing. You could touch it here, it could cry, you could but they can have a language that has this infinitary capacity, and their minds are not fit to understand an arbitrary sentence from a potential infinity of sentences on first hearing. And so there's really something special. He thought that meant the mind was not any kind of machine, was not any part of nature. Do you agree with that?
Well, I want to go a little bit further. I want to say, in addition to semantics, in a way that I just tried to explain it, you need two other features to get a human language. You need compositionality, the ability to understand a sentence by understanding the components and the way they're arranged. So you understand John loves Mary different from Mary loves John because of how it's composed.
Except John doesn't do that. That's one of his problems.
And the second feature is the one you just hinted at. In addition to compositionality, in human languages, you get generativity. You can keep generating new sentences. Now, if you got all of that, you got semantics, you got compositionality of syntax and generativity of syntax, you got what we got.
So let me ask you a question, John. I mean, the question is, so we got language. Language is used in communication, and it's pretty privileged to humans. Now, I want to say classical philosophers, but I don't mean Greek philosophers. I mean people like Locke and Hume thought that this representational ability of language came from the representational ability in our mind, that it was ideas that have this representation, and then language is a development that allows us to convey the representations we have in our mind to others. I must admit, it's an unfashionable picture. I like it. What do you think of that?
Okay.
Is it mind first or language?
Okay, I think it's clear that our capacity to speak a language is a development of more basic biological capacities in the mind, of capacity of the mind to think. And animals can think, there's no question about that, though a lot of philosophers deny it. Okay, but what's special is that once you get language on top of the pre-linguistic capacity to think, you have an enormous capacity, which non-linguistic animals don't have. Now, those classic philosophers had a wrong theory about how it worked. They thought it worked because we have these little images. So you understand the word dog because you got an image of a dog. You understand the word cat and so on. That story doesn't work.
Well, that makes it a lot more like animal communication. But I want to put Don's question a different way. So here's a good way for you to learn what I think. I tell you what I think. Right? You can observe my behavior, but you could never learn just by observing my movements that I think, well, pi is perhaps the most overrated number in the history of all numbers. Right? You have to ask me about what I think about pi, and the only way you can learn that is by telling you it. So language gives us a really unique window into other minds.
Yeah.
But here's the question. If the mind comes first, right, I can't read your mind.
Yeah.
The only reason I can read your mind is because I can know your language. But how can I know your language if I can't read your mind? You know what I mean? I mean, some people think, well, it's because we speak a shared language that we know each other's mind. But how does that happen in the first place?
Well, okay.
I mean, your mind is locked up in your head.
No, we share with humans a whole lot of common features. And this is why you know when your baby's unhappy or you know when it's hungry, even though it hasn't got a language. Now, on this commonality of shared biologically basic features, you then build human representation and human communication. Once you got that, then you can find out enormous things about people's minds that you couldn't possibly find out just by observing their non-linguistic behavior. I've written 17 books. Figure out what I think without
I've read
reading
those
the
17 books.
Right.
I still can't figure out, John.
That's your problem.
So let me ask you another kind of question. Some people believe, I don't think this is such a popular view anymore, but it was a popular view, that people with different languages
Yeah.
live in different worlds.
Yeah.
There was what was called the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. Had to do with snow, how the Eskimos had, 17 words for snow. It turns out not to be true, but I mean, that's a belief that many people once had, that language kind of makes the world. Rather than represents the world that's already there, language somehow carves up the world and creates the world. What do you think of that thought?
Well, okay, it's not entirely false. Now, Sapir-Whorf wanted much more out of it than just the common sense idea that if you got a richer color vocabulary, you'll see more different colors than people will. But Sapir and Whorf thought you have a whole completely different metaphysics if you have a different language. If you got one word that means there are 6 white fence posts on the left belonging to my brother-in-law, you're going to see reality differently from the way the rest of us do. Now, it turns out the empirical evidence didn't support those guys very well. But there's something in it. There's something in the way that we talk. And the best way to do this is to learn a foreign language. There was a time in my life when I really learned French, so I had dreams in French, and I started, saying disgusting things in French. I won't repeat them here. And the point is, you do then start to think in a slightly different way. You look at a girl and you think, elle est jolie laide. Now, that's not an idea you have in English. I can't even translate that into English. So you do get these differences.
Something about jolly and laying.
Yeah, we are getting there. We're working on it. But there's a neat evidence provided by my colleague Dan Slobin. He did some experiments where you show little kids a series of pictures, and the kids describe the pictures. And the interesting is Spanish-speaking kids give different descriptions from English-speaking kids. So the English-speaking kid said, the boy climbed the tree. The Spanish-speaking kid says, the boy is high in the tree. Está alto. See, the Spanish speaker describes the result of the process. The English speaker describes the process, climbing, that produces the result. I think that's interesting.
Because Spanish doesn't have very many verbs for motion. It doesn't lexicalize the different modes of motion in the lexical meaning of verbs. So it has very few ways of describing.
Well, that's a good illustration of the point.
Explains the defeat of the Spanish Armada, because the record showed the Spanish just said, "Sep came, great victory," but nobody ever brought the question, how do we get there? But I digress. So John, when you were a student at Oxford in the 60s, that was a very exciting time.
Yeah, 60s.
Yeah, in the philosophy of language.
No, sorry, 50s.
Because, one way to look at it is if you go back to Locke, but then even to Frege and Russell in the first part of the 20th century, the focus is on representation, mental, and then it gets conveyed by language. But with Strawson and Austin and also Wittgenstein from
And
down the
Searle.
road, due in America, completely due to your influence, this idea that no, language is fundamentally action. It's a way of doing things.
Yes.
Now, some people have thought that have kind of left the mind out of it, but you combine the two. Give us the overall picture of how you do that.
Here's the overall picture. It is essential to language that you represent states of affairs in the world. The remarkable thing about language is you not only represent how things are, that's statements, but how you want other people to make them be. That's orders and commands. Or how you intend to make them be. Those are promises. Or how you wish they had turned out, or what your attitude toward them is. Those are expressives, like apologizing, thanking, and congratulating. The bottom line is this. Every utterance is a speech act. But speech acts typically represent something in what I call a propositional content. So you can predict that I will leave the room, and you can order me to leave the room, and you can lament the fact that I left the room. Different speech acts, same content.
Wait a minute, John. I'm just going to say an arbitrary word. That's an utterance. Water. What speech? I haven't performed it. I said water.
Yeah, but you didn't give me the whole proposition. I would want to know, do you want water? Be my guest. Or do you think there's too much water in here? Or you are a Californian thinking, my God, what am I going to do about the absence of water?
It's some kind of complete utterance. I mean, because if I just say water, I haven't...
It can be.
Yeah.
You can have a one-word sentence, but the unit of the speech act is the whole damned sentence. It can be a one-word sentence, but you've got to be able to represent a state of affairs, such as the fact that there's water there if it's raining, or you want water if you're asking for water.
But why does the word have to do the whole job of representing the state of affairs? Can't the word be an add-on to what's just obvious?
Typically, the word contributes its meaning to the meaning of the whole sentence. There are some times where the context is sufficient for you to communicate a whole proposition just by uttering a single word. So if somebody's talking too much, you say, enough. And they will, unless they're very impolite, they'll get the message.
Or they're a philosopher.
Wait.
Or both.
Was that an example or a speech act?
No, I was just...
So look, let me ask you a question though. What is I learn when I learn an individual word? An individual word isn't a speech act because an individual word could be in many different speech acts. So what is it that I learn when I learn the meaning of, I don't know?
If you really learn the meaning of the word, you learn how to use the word in sentences. So there are famous words that are hard to translate from German, like Angst. And if you learn the meaning of the word Angst, then you will learn how to use that word in sentences. And we borrow these words from other languages. So I have friends who tell me they suffer the angst of post-industrial man under late capitalism. It's not a problem I have, but they claim to have it. But that's what they learn when they learn angst. Now, my doggy, he does not suffer the angst of post-industrial canines, even under late capitalism. And he doesn't have a problem because he hasn't got a language. That's not a problem. He's got a language.
Okay, we've talked about doggies and dolphins and coyotes. So I want to ask something not about human language, but the human mind.
Yeah.
What is it that enables the human mind to do this that dogs and dolphins and chimps, as far as we know, don't?
Yeah. Well, it's the cortex.
I know that, but...
And we don't... we wish we knew how it worked. And there are a whole lot of guys being paid a lot of money to figure it out within a stone's throw of here, and I keep telling them, get busy and figure out how the brain does it. How do we learn language? How does the brain produce consciousness? We don't know the details of how it works in the plumbing, and we won't fully understand it until we have a better science of the brain.
You're listening to Philosophy Talk. We're thinking about how words work with John Searle, author of Seeing Things as They Are, a Theory of Perception.
Do words have meaning because we use them in a certain way, or do we use them in a certain way because of the meaning they have? Which came first, the meaning or the use?
Are you meaningful because I use you, or do I use you because you're meaningful? We're coming to you from the Marsh Theatre in Berkeley. We'll take questions from our live audience when Philosophy Talk continues.
Everybody! Hi dum diddle dum sleepy come baby bye woof woof hey double scream a lot die.
Thanks to our musical guests, the Playtones. I'm John Perry. This is Philosophy Talk, the program that questions everything
except your intelligence. I'm Ken Taylor. Our guest is John Searle from the UC Berkeley, and we're thinking about how words work. And we've got a question from our live audience. Welcome to Philosophy Talk.
Hi, Larry from Oakland. Professor Searle, you just mentioned, you want to get those guys out there and get to understand how the brain actually works. Well, I just wanted to get your take on somebody like Stanislas Dehaene, who's done things like reading in the brain. He just published a new thing called Consciousness in the Brain. Curious to hear what you make of some of the efforts that have been made towards that, and in particular, given the nature of language and its concrete consequences for how we feel, how we respond emotionally. An important thing that comes up as well is the nature of qualia. And in particular, one of the things that Dehaene does in his last book, he says, look, qualia, this becomes sort of the Rosetta Stone for understanding the nature of human consciousness, human experience. But guys, we're on the track now for looking at models of cognitive processing, information processing from a neurological perspective. In another generation or so, we're going to look at qualia as if it were, like vitalism and its role in biology. And I just wanted to get your take on that.
Yeah.
And John, you can start by telling us what qualia are in case
okay.
some of us have forgotten.
The word qualia is used to refer to the qualitative character of all conscious states. So, for example, the qualia of drinking water is different from the quality of listening to music or worrying about your income tax. And the problem with the thesis just presented is that all consciousness is qualia. So if you say, well, we're going to study consciousness but not study qualia, you've thrown out the baby with the bathwater, because all conscious states have a qualitative feel. Some people think, well, thinking about mathematics doesn't have a qualitative feel. Try thinking 2 + 2 = 4 in French or in German. It feels differently. 2 + 2 sind 4. It has a different feel altogether.
I want to ask you a question that this question made me think about. So you might talk about the capacity for language, and you might think it's a kind of isolated capacity in the brain. Or you might think the capacity for language sits on top of a whole bunch of other stuff. There's our perceptual capacities, there's our capacity for planning, there's self-consciousness, because you might think only cells can have language, because you have these things like I, you, it, and there's perspectivalness. So what do you think? Is language Chomsky thinks there's this little language organ that's like a special encapsulated thing. But you might also think that the capacity for language is an emergent capacity that's built, that emerges because of the kind of overall structure of the conscious.
But I think both
reasoning
of
mind.
those are true if you understand them right. It's clear that humans have a special capacity for language that's built into our neurobiology that's quite unlike other animals. Everybody would agree to that, I take it. But of course, it meshes with the rest of our life. The French philosopher La Rochefoucauld said, very few people would ever fall in love if they never read about it. And of course, we'd have to say if they never saw it on television or on their iPhone or whatever. So language shapes our whole mode of being, but at the same time, it is a special cognitive capacity built into the brain. And in response to the idea, well, we might study the brain without studying qualia, the standard way now is people want to substitute something like information. That's a cop-out. Information is one of these buzzwords where it gives the impression you think you know what you're talking about when really you don't. The information, insofar as it's conscious, always comes in a qualitative form.
Welcome to Philosophy Talk.
Hi, my name is Alyssa, and I live in Berkeley, but I'm from Boston. And I noticed that, throughout your conversation, you have been sort of dismissing the research that's been done specifically with apes having to do with language, and a little bit of chimps, and there hasn't been any discussion about gorillas. And I think probably a lot of your audience here has heard of Coco the gorilla, the most famous. And you were talking about how what makes us unique as humans is the ability to comment on a state of affairs and how we wish a state of affairs might be, and Coco has been able to do that on a number of occasions. She makes requests. She names new things that she doesn't know how to name by putting together 2 different words. So I guess I'm wondering what you think might be learned from that kind of language, and I want to call it language, not communication, and if you think it's not a useful way to learn about the origins of human language, why not?
Yeah, well, the answer is very simple. Use any information you get your hands on, and stick with anything that works. Now, as I'm sure you know, there were efforts, really serious efforts, to teach human languages to chimpanzees. And the baby chimp was brought up in a human family to try to teach them the language. The results of these efforts, there were some in Reno and others in Georgia, the results of these efforts were ambiguous. It isn't clear that the animal got anything like a human generative capacity for language.
But look, to say that is not to dismiss this research.
Yeah.
I mean, animal minds are complicated and interesting things.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I doubt you would deny that somehow or other, evolution got us from the way our primate progenitors were to the way we are now.
Yeah.
By some series of steps, maybe some leaps. It's not useful to dismiss our progenitors as uninteresting, but it's also not useful to try to reduce what we do to what they do.
But one interesting thing about
I
Coco,
agree with that.
if I've got Coco straight, was that in a lot of cases it's hard to know whether it's the intellectual capacity or the inability to recognize sounds and produce sounds. And with Coco, they use sign language, and it seemed a lot better. There were all various methodological questions. Very hard to prove things with just one case. But, I found Coco pretty impressive. Yeah. I mean, probably would have done okay. Freshman year might have
And thanks for
little
that.
trouble with his sophomore year.
And I will say that cognitive science, ethology, all this have come a long way. I mean, look, the behaviorists used to go around thinking that human language was stimulus response. They used to go around thinking that, same techniques for learning that pigeons had were the same ones that humans applied. That's silly. That was silly science. That was terrible science, behaviorists.
No, I think
now, one
we've
of the things
overcome
that's
that.
happened in the intervening years is that we've come to have a much greater appreciation of the complexity of animal minds. And some of the capacities that we think are characteristically human, we see more precursors of them, like this Machiavellian intelligence thing. We see more precursors of them in especially other primates, but also like whales and dolphins, than we recognize. But that doesn't. Human language, all that stuff does not reduce to that. It's something different.
Well, look, even if we got to the point where we found a species of animals with which we could communicate as the way we communicate with each other, I would say welcome to the club. As far as we know, we can't do that. There are no animals we can do that with. But let's keep the research going. Let's see how far we can get.
So there's something else. 'Cause we talked about language as a response to stimulus, right? And you said, it can't be that, because Aristotle was a long time ago, blah, blah, blah. But here's something else that we do with human language. We seem to make up things. We seem to create things by characterizing them. I mean, what is the United States? It's an entity that exists only because we say it exists, right? So there's no, antecedent stimulus to which, or not even an antecedent object to which we're referring. What's up with that?
Okay, now this is a part of the language that I think is absolutely crucial and unfortunately neglected. We have a capacity to create a reality by linguistically representing it as existing. I'm thinking of money, property, government, marriage, etc. The guy's only the president because we represent him linguistically as being president. This is the United States. I'm a citizen. You are citizens. This is the University of California. All of those exist because they're represented as such. It's no exaggeration to say that human civilization, as distinct from animal societies, is created by a certain type of speech act.
That sounds like thinking that it's so making it.
That's exactly what happens. If we all stop thinking that this stuff is money, then it stops functioning as money. And this is what happens. I mean, it happened in the Soviet Union when the ruble collapsed.
I'm going to think something. I am the king of Pupatanya.
Yes, and if you can get everybody to agree, Your Highness, you become the king. This was the problem with Emperor Norton. There was a guy, a drunk, ran around San Francisco in the 19th century claiming he was Emperor Norton. And they would humor him by giving him free beer in the bars. But what's the difference between him and the real emperor? Well, a real emperor's got everybody to agree. And Marx actually put this, not my favorite philosophy, but he put this rather well. He said, people think that we are his subjects because he's the king, but in fact, he's only the king because we think we're his subjects. And this is the key to
Is
understanding
that Groucho or Carl?
Yeah, either way.
Welcome to Philosophy Talk, man.
Hi, I'm Nicola from Germany, and I have the question which goes a little bit more from the individual perspective to like a political or social perspective. And I ask myself, what do you think about lie or violence in language if you come to political language? Because so many people in politics speak so much about friendship or things like that, but they seem to use the word to really say something else. Like Toni Morrison has said, language can be so violent in this context because it's full, less of, with little sense. So what do you think about it?
Okay, I'd love to talk about that at great length, but two things briefly. One is the systematic distortion of language is essential for certain types of political corruptions, absolutely basic. But the other thing is I'm glad you used the word violence, because really vicious regimes have an especially violent form of language. Du bist nicht dein Volk ist alles. You're nothing. Your people is everything. Ein Volk, ein Reich, ein Führer. One people, one country, one leader. Sprich Deutsch, denk Deutsch, sei. I mean, I hope you hear the sort of the rhythmic hatred in all of these slogans. These are slogans, I could go on all day. These are slogans from the Nazi period, and it's no accident that they involved the debasement of language. This is the country that produces Leibniz and Kant, and it's down to sprich Deutsch, denk Deutsch, sei Deutsch.
But, this is a complicated thing. We could do a whole show on
Let's do it.
We could do a whole show on that. Because it's not just regimes like that. By somebody calling me the N-word, they're doing harm just by uttering a noise.
Yeah.
Right? They're attempting degrading by calling a woman a slut, or I mean, it's that kind of use of language has its own kind of dynamics. And I wish we had time to talk about it, but we have to bring it to a close. And I'm going to thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Our guest has been John Searle, professor of philosophy at UC Berkeley, a prolific and influential philosopher, author most recently of Seeing Things as They Are, a theory of perception. So, John, what are your thoughts today? I know you've thought about these topics a lot, as have I.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's great to talk to John Searle. He's such a lively guy. He's got such a big part in the history of the subject we both love, the philosophy of language. And as an older fellow myself, he's a bit older, and it makes me think, gosh, I got to get busy. I got a lot of catching up to do. What did he say, 21 books?
17
books?
I think he said.
Jesus.
I think he said.
Come on, Searle, take a vacation.
Yeah, well, I got a lot of... You make me tired. What do you think he makes me? So that's life, though. But you know what? This is a great conversation, and it will continue at Philosopher's Corner, at our online community of thinkers, where our motto is, cogito ergo blogo. I think, therefore I blog. And you too can become a partner in that community. Just visit our website, philosophytalk.org.
Now, from noise to meaning, from 0 to 60, it's Ian Scholes, the 60-second philosopher.
Ian Scholes, I don't know if it's the proliferation of the internet or what, but it seems to me that the meaning of words is rapidly becoming degraded. I have heard President Obama described as a fascist. I've also heard him called Stalinist. Well, which is it, Internet? And which one is the more Orwellian? Orwell himself, back in the day, wrote in a 1944 op-ed that fascism is used to describe, quote, farmers, shopkeepers, social credit, corporal punishment, fox hunting, bullfighting. The 1922 committee, the 1941 committee, Kipling, Gandhi, Chiang Kai-shek, homosexuality, Priestley's podcasts, youth hostels, astrology, women, dogs, and I don't know what else, unquote. Now, half the things in this list, we have no idea what they even are anymore. The other day, I saw somebody describe his own conservatism as Burkean. I assume that refers to Edmund Burke, which made me sad. He probably hasn't been checked out of the library since 1982. Now, just thinking about the words quixotic, Kafkaesque, and Brobdingnagian. Do we remember what they mean? Once books disappear, as it looks like they might, those words might disappear as well. There are concepts right now, evolution comes to mind, that people want to go away very badly. In the case of evolution, it has come to pass that as many as 2 out of 3 Americans don't believe in it. I don't know what it means when a word that refers to a real thing is not accepted as a real thing. I assume evolution will continue whether we think it's real or not. I know we have the opposite. Creationism, for instance, is not a real thing, and yet it has a word like vampires, zombies, and unicorns. Or take the word awesome, used to describe things like the Grand Canyon or Godzilla, the suddenly revealed face of God. Now it means cute or mildly interesting. There's the word brave, which is often used to describe an actor's performance. I've also seen the word fierce, often used to describe a feminist memoir. Okay, that's fine, but what do we call soldiers who take out a fascist bunker using only their teeth? Awesome, I guess, if we watch it on YouTube. The weirdest thing now is the trend in commenting. Commenters on various sites make up names like Demo Rats or Republic Thugs or Obummer to let people know where they stand politically. I recently read Thug in Yahoo for Netanyahu. There's a pun or something in there somewhere, I guess. I wonder if people come up with these off the top of their heads, or they have an index card in which they write out various options like Nothing Yahoo or Nutty Yoo-hoo, for instance, before finally deciding. I have no idea. I only know there's probably not an evolution in the social evolution sense to the process, because evolution, like global warming, is just a plot by scientists to trick us into funding libraries. And everybody knows libraries are a job for the free marketplace, and that is totally awesome, by which I mean, of course, fierce, proud, brave, and only mildly interesting. I gotta go.
Philosophy Talk is a presentation of Ben Manila Productions and the trustees of Leland Stanford Junior University, copyright 2015.
Our executive producer is David Demarest. Special thanks to Stephanie Wiseman, Erica Sokolauer-Shane, Matt Simon, James Hanley, Dan Brandon, Dominic Borg, and Crystal Nickerson.
The program is produced by Devin Strolovich. Laura McGuire is our Director of Research. Our Marketing Director is Dave Millar.
Support for Philosophy Talk comes from various groups at Stanford University and the partners in our online community of thinkers.
And from the members of KALW, local public radio for San Francisco, where our program originates.
Now, the views expressed, or sometimes misexpressed on this program, do not necessarily represent the opinions of Stanford University or of our other funders, not even when they're true and absolutely reasonable.
This conversation continues on our website, philosophytalk.org, where you too can become a partner in our community of thinkers. I'm John Perry.
I'm Ken Taylor. Thank you for listening.
And thank you for thinking.